February Exec Committee meeting. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting, and I also want to take a moment to say thank you to each of you who, in your own way, reached out to check on me. I had a severe migraine at our last general body meeting and wasn't able to really get back to some form of normalcy until Friday. So it doesn't happen often, but sometimes I get severe migraines. But in either case, I am well tonight. I want to thank you all for your concern, but I also want to highlight to the first vice chair, second vice chair for leading in ways that they are more than capable of doing so. And so thank you both for your participation and for leading in the meeting. With that, the next item on the agenda, so that will, take part of my welcome. The next item on the agenda, number 2, is an introduction of board officers and committee chairs. I'm not going to run around and do that. What I would ask is that those who've been on the call, you pretty much know who the chairs and vice chairs are. I would ask each chair and vice chair that as you speak this evening, please introduce your name and the committee that you represent, and that will suffice item number 2. Moving along to item number 3, are there any corrections that need to be made to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda. Mr. Jordan, may I get a second, Mr. Gordon? So, motion accepted from Mr. Jordan and second by Mr. Gordon. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from January? Are there any noted corrections or edits? Okay, great. Should you have any edits or corrections, please feel free to notify the board office. But hearing none, I'm going to move that we've accepted the minutes as presented. And are there any abstentions or any objections? Great, thank you. So moving to item number 5, the chairperson's report. So I just want to mention a few things, nothing earth-shattering, I don't think, but I want to pick up a topic that has garnered a lot of interest most of my afternoon. I was made aware of this proposal that is being introduced tomorrow. The number of it is Intro 2186, and the main supporter of this bill or this intro is Speaker Corey Johnson, and it's received support from other council members, including Council Member Steve Levin. And essentially what it calls for is the bill that would create a 10-year comprehensive planning cycle connecting the budget, land use, and strategic planning process. That's at the lead of Governor Cuomo, and as I said, is the primary sponsor being Corey Johnson. Now, there have been many positions about what this plan will do to the voice of community boards, and there are subsequent conversations that have to take place well beyond tomorrow's public hearing. I've received information, and listen again, I will admit, I wasn't really tuned into this item until about 3:30, maybe 4 o'clock this afternoon. And there have been requests from board members who have inquired about whether or not community board are going to take a position on this, meaning do we vote in favor or against it? Given the short notice that we've taken, that I've received this information, and by way of the board office, it is not something that is on tonight's agenda. However, that is not to say that if we don't speak tonight at tomorrow's introductory hearing, that we don't have an opportunity to address it at a later date. And so I want to be clear and letting everyone know I'm not at the position at this time to have it added to the agenda. I don't want to put something on the agenda that hasn't given everyone an opportunity to really digest and understand it so that we can have appropriate comments, material comments, with a true evaluation and a dissecting of the plan so we can take a solid position. So I wanted to lead with that and just let everyone know that it is now on my radar. I will definitely have it. And because honestly, the very aspects of the intro, one would think would garner a lot of feedback from the respective committees as we go through the rest of this month and pretty much half, if not all, of March. And so at some point, every committee will have an opportunity to address some of the points of the intro. And then at the larger general body meeting, and prior to that, even exec committee meeting, it'll give us time to have material and subsequent conversations so that we can take a true position and make the right recommendation. So I just wanted to lead with that so that anyone would think that we were skirting the issue. Just wanted to be clear about the position and where we are at this time. A little bit of housekeeping, and really under the category of reminders, refreshers. I don't care how long you serve on a community board, how engaged you are. Every now and then it's helpful to have a reminder. And so what I want to just briefly touch on is, we're in an environment now where we're pretty much, I would say it's pretty safe to say we're going to be virtual for a better part of this year. Maybe not the entire year, but at least the halfway through the year. And so while virtual meetings are helpful, it allows people to get access where they are. They don't have to go through some of the troubles of coming out to the meetings. We are given an environment that was largely led through the efforts of Do It. And so with all due respect to everyone who is an exec committee member, a non-exec committee member, anyone who's just a supporter of CB2, I nor the office do not need any more reminders about challenges you may or may not have with the technology we're using, right? Simply put, we understand that we have Webex tonight. We understand that we're using Webex tonight, and we understand that it may be a challenge. We've also communicated at various points, and I know I've said this to the point that I am repeating myself, that we are happy and embrace the transition to Zoom. But you can't do that overnight. There's a process. We need to have different layers of approval. There's a budgetary process and all of that. We have now recently received the necessary approvals that we can proceed with the Zoom. And so hopefully the next meeting or two will have us on a Zoom platform. But there's no need for the reminders. We struggle with accessing the same technology as everyone else. And so we get it. We're going to make those changes, and you should expect those coming very soon. Related to that, in a virtual environment, is, at least in my mind, and others may have a different perspective, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with having a different perspective. Decorum and how we handle ourselves is even greater. So disruptive chat messages do not help the meeting be forward and efficient. Over talking and dominating the conversation is not helpful to the meeting. The same way you would act in person is the same way I would hope everyone would act on virtual meeting sessions. And so I'm not suggesting that if there's a particular item that you lose your passion. I'm fine with that. That's what makes Community Board 2 what it is. That's what makes the democratic process work. Keep the passion. I'm just asking you not to lose the respect and not dominate the conversation so that others can't have a perspective. It is important that we all hear from everyone and that we engage in a way that is conducive and cohesive to doing what's right for the constituents and the people we represent in our respective positions on Community Board 2. And so I hope that, like I said, under the category of housekeeping, we don't forget these things. These are more or less just reminders. Last but not least, and this is something that has transcended through my predecessors. And so when I first came on to Community Board 2, the chair at that time was Shirley McWright. And then when Shirley decided to step down to take on another role, John Dew served as chair. And then when John Dew stepped down, then Shirley came back. And then when Shirley had issues with her health, Irene came back. And then thankful to all of you, I am now the chair. Through that same period of previous chairs that have served before me, some have had a consistent mantra, and I'll use Shirley McRae as an example. She would constantly say, work is done at the committee. And if you've ever heard that term, nod your head. Okay, great. So we all familiar with that term. In that same vein, if the work is done at the committee, you have to allow the committee to be heard from by the community. There is no such thing as the community can't speak at a committee meeting. No such thing. We may have certain criteria that we follow at the exec committee meeting. It may be a little bit more challenging in the general body meeting, but even in general body meetings, what we've decided to do, particularly on items that require a vote, because you don't want to rehash the meeting, we've asked members of the community who have something that is material and could be a valid point in a voting item to write down their information, pass it along to the closest board member that's there, and have the board member ask that question. But at the committee level, there is absolutely no need to not hear from the community on an item that requires a vote. If there are people who have taken the time to come to a meeting and they have an item that they want to discuss that could be material and impactful to the vote, by all means, they should be allowed to speak. To give you an example, when we have public hearings that take place, or we have meetings, in a traditional sense during the summer months, when we would normally, we being the executive committee, would act on behalf of the general board. You would always I would always carve out, and it's been tradition that we would always carve out an opportunity for the community to speak on an item before we take a vote. That is consistent. That should continue to change from the executive committee all the way down. And so once again, these are just friendly reminders as part of the chair's report. The community has every right, and I hope that you encourage and engage the community to speak and be heard from on items that could be material to a vote. And let me say this last point. It's not really up to the respective chairs and or co-chairs to determine what's material or not, or to determine who has the right to speak. If someone is there from the community and have an item they want to speak, let them speak. If there's someone who's serving as a public member of the community, please, let's engage them and let them speak. If the work is done at the committee, then you have to hear from the community at the committee. So let me pause before we move to the next item. And are there any questions from board members on what I just covered?
I have a question. Sir.
Sure, Ben.
Yeah. Okay. It's somewhat related. If it's not, then you'll tell me to speak later on. I mean, I'm fine with everything, that you've shared. I'm concerned with when people who, from the community or from wherever, come to speak on an issue, and then are extremely disrespectful to members of my committee or members of the community or whatever, to the point where we had this situation where members of my committee wrote to me and said they should have been shut down. Now, on one hand, I totally agree. It's a community board, and community has a right and an obligation, to speak. I'm good. But at what point does it become such a situation that they're shut down? And I mean, when we had meetings in person, you were always very good at, you or others or in other venues, saying we'll stop the meeting. We might have to, call for whatever, that in a personal meeting, I think it's almost easier to do. But on this type of platform, is it the staff person who is controlling, the Zoom or the Webex? Is it the chair who says that person can't speak? I'd like to understand that a little bit more so that we can be fair to the community, but also I feel some of my members felt they were not treated respectfully. And I we all care about our members and love our members of our committee. So I ask you for your support.
Yeah, I mean, listen, being a chair or taking a lead on a very passionate or item that has garnered a lot of support and interest is always going to be difficult. That's consistent whether you are virtual or if you're in person. If I go back to my own personal references since I've been chair, if we were having a discussion about borough-based jails and as passionate and as combative as they were, Whether it was in person or virtual, in my mind, would not have made a difference, because it is a topic that garners a lot of attention, a lot of feelings, a lot of support. I'm not in favor. It's not my default knee-jerk reaction to cancel meetings or to shut down virtual meetings. I think it's not fair, and I use that term loosely. A lot of things about life aren't fair, but it's not. I think it's in our best interest. Let me say it that way. It's not in our best interest to have one individual be so passionate that it borders disruption that the rest of the community can't have their opinion addressed. Every chair and co-chair of the respective committee is just that. And so where you have support from the office, either in the form of Carol Ann, Taya, or Gustavo, they are just there to support. They are there to help us from an electronic or technology perspective. But the decision to proceed, not to proceed, the decision to have to at all costs, barring exhausting every other option, and having to decide that you ultimately can't proceed with your meeting because the disruption is so great, then that's the decision by the chair and the co-chair, in which case the supporting staff will do whatever is advised from them from the chair and co-chair. But at no time should the office make that decision. That should be a chair and a co-chair making that decision.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that's helpful.
It is. I guess when the person in our situation who was very disruptive called the other members of our committee racist and saying, "We'll see you in court," I guess maybe I didn't handle it as best as I could have, but we just continued to try to move the meeting along. But the person indicated that on the chat more than once. And again, I want to be supportive of my committee members as well as the community. So,
yeah, Betty, what I'll say is, there is no right or wrong answer. I'm not going to second guess any chairperson how they handle a difficult situation in the height of the meeting, particularly if I'm not there to observe. Right? I'm not going to say anyone was right or wrong, but I will say that there is no blanket textbook approach on how to handle these situations. It's really left up to each individual, and you would hope that. And I got to be honest with you, I have the utmost respect and confidence and belief in every community board member, every constituent that we serve, and even guests and people who come in to give presentations, that they come into the meeting being respectful and the intent to want to have democratic process done. Like everything, there's moments where things go off the rail. Doesn't mean that I'm gonna take a broad blanket approach to how we handle the community. It's going to be on a case by case basis. And what I'll say is whatever decision each chair makes is the right one. If it's something that wasn't right, and we learn from it, then we'll have a moment. We can do it privately, and I'll give you my perspective. Doesn't make it right. I'm just giving you an alternative perspective, and then we go from there. Simple as that. But don't second guess yourself. If you do what you can for the purpose of trying to keep the issue at hand and do what's best for the community, and at the end of the day, you look at yourself in the mirror, you did that, then you did the right thing. Don't second guess yourself.
Thank you. I don't want to take up too much more time, but if the persons who are speaking on an issue are from other states or part of the country, I mean, we are a community board, and we, as you say, we listen to members of our neighborhoods, communities, the city. Should we maybe think about having a protocol that people introduce themselves or are noted as Mr. So-and-so from Tennessee or from California? Because, I mean, in my opinion, they have opinions, but it's not the same as if you live in the community.
So in fairness to your question, and in fairness to everyone on the call this evening, let's take that aside,
Okay.
because what I don't have an answer on is to, if I say I'm Lenny and I'm from, matter of fact, you all know me, right? And let's say I want to cause disruption in a meeting, and I say, you know what, my name is Bill Flournoy and I'm from Newark, New Jersey. You can't verify if I'm Bill Flournoy and from Newark, New Jersey, right? So I don't want to dismiss your question. Let me give it some thought. Let you and I have a chance to discuss it, and we can come up with a right protocol if needed. to help, address the underlying question that you have.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions from any board members? Committee members, I should say. All right, great. Thank you, everyone. Let's get into the heart of our meeting. We have committees for action tonight. And the first item will be Health, Environment, and Social Services. Mr. Brandon Smith is our first speaker.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Brandon Smith. I'm the chair of Health, Environment, and Social Services. Currently, we don't have a vice chair of Health, Environment, and Social Services. Our secretary is Jessica Thurston, and she's incredibly supportive in that capacity and knows many things. So I want to recognize her in that regard. I have one item for board business tonight from the agenda, and I would just note it doesn't seem like I'm scheduled to give to report on my committee meeting at any point for this month, because I reported on the liquor licenses at the general board meeting. So maybe I could get a slot to report in the committees to report section, but the report that I have for action is an item that we voted on and approved by a margin of 6-0-0 at our last meeting. Going back a few months, our committee is very interested on making sure that we are spending our time wisely and also addressing the liquor licenses that actually have the most concerning aspects to them. So what we've agreed to do is develop a list of objective criteria that essentially does not require us to do anything except conduct a more detailed review, consider taking a more detailed review of items that present this list of qualities. So we're not required to vote a certain way. We're not required to say yes or no to any of these items, but just to explore them, because they're basically risk factors that we've seen on licenses that have had concerns that at least I've seen over the past 8 years, but everybody on our committee had input on this, and we basically came up with this list. So, I mean, the list is being shown on the screen. If anybody is unable to see it for any reason, it consists of locations that have private parties, hotel licenses, locations that are closing between 2 and 4 a.m. on the indoors, locations in a residential neighborhood, outdoor seating, places that have outdoor seating, rooftops, backyards, DJs and live music, large occupancy. That's a general term, but we decided to quantify it as spaces that are both physically large in their capacity to seat a number of people. We said this at 99 persons, but I think just because it's like, if it's 98 persons, we'll probably take a deeper look at it too. This is more just to outline risks than it is to really require courses of action. A prior history of complaints, community concerns. Obviously, if the community is concerned about something, we're going to look deeper into it. And one of our committee members brought up a good suggestion, which was newly constructed buildings, because when you have a newly constructed building, you may not have awareness of the risks that exist from surrounding community members about prior locations that may have had a history at that location. So upon discussion, really at a few meetings, our committee voted unanimously to approve these guidelines by a margin of 6-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any questions for the committee's recommendation presented by Mr. Smith? All right.
I have a question.
I said, all right, Barbara.
Oh, I didn't hear that. Oh, thank you. Two things. It mentions here 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. indoor closing times. Are outdoor, I forget, is there a rule that outdoors has to be closed by midnight? Is that it, or?
So I think our committee approaches these subjects differently. It's, certainly this is a list of things that are going to prompt us to undertake further review. This is not a list of what we view are appropriate hours for given locations. I think what you could take from this list is locations that have outdoor seating, period, regardless of the hours, as
Okay.
well as indoor seating that is going to be serving alcohol between 2 and 4 a.m. That's going to be something that we want to take a deeper review into. But this is not our suggestion as to what are the appropriate hours
Okay.
for any given place.
That I appreciate that clarification. My real question is, you're talking about doing a deeper dive if these issues come up. Now, can you explain to us what you do now and how this might differ from what you do now? And when you say take a deeper dive, if you're not doing that, are you just looking at the papers that come in? And would you even listen to does the person have to come in and make a presentation?
Well, from one attorney to another, Barbara, I picked up on your question very accurately, I think. And I don't think that there's a quantification that I would put upon what would constitute a quote deeper dive as a term of art. I think in this respect, what we would do is necessarily what we would do in this is just make sure that we are aware of the concerns that exist for a given application. I think if there is a circumstance where, say, a location has outdoor seating, and there, in some circumstances, we have to hear from numerous liquor licenses over the course of a meeting, it's important for us to really go into what the issues are with the outdoor seating. Make sure that we understand the hours for the outdoor seating and consider their consistency with other surrounding locations. And I think the nature of an inquiry is really specific to the nature of a given location, but we don't have a step-by-step process outline for what a deeper dive would necessarily entail. I think what it's mainly geared towards is just making sure that we have awareness of the risks that exist and that we make a more informed decision when we see these things come up.
Okay, well, again, maybe I'm not explaining myself well enough. I'm not so much concerned as to what a deeper dive is, but how does this protocol change whatever it is you're doing now?
I don't think it does, really. I don't think it does. I think, our committee is committed to making sure that we appropriately assess all liquor licenses. And I think there's no fast track process for things that don't possess these qualities. I think it's really just to make sure that the committee members are aware of the risks that we've seen in the past, and hopefully it will inform our decisions on things in the future.
Okay, so it's more like a checklist then, or just a reminder.
I think I can say it might have some capacity in that regard, but I really view it as just making sure that we're aware of the risks and that exist for that have been associated with previous places of concern in the past.
Okay, as long as it's not going to decrease what you do now in general, which is really what you've said, it's not going to affect that. So I think it's fine then.
Yeah, it's
Right.
not going to decrease. It's not going to decrease anything that the committee's purview is, because quite frankly, in order for that committee's purview to change, we'd all have to vote on it. So that's not an option.
All right. Thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it.
Mr. Jordan?
I just want to thank you very much. I think the committee did a good job with this. I think most committees, if they can, should have those kind of guidelines. Not only is it things to focus on when you're reviewing applications, but also as a legacy for the committee to pass down to new members and also and maybe even new chairs at some point in time. So I think that's a very good idea, and I'm all for it.
Mr. Jordan?
Any other discussion on the presentation from Mr. Smith? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the committee's recommendation. Ms. Fibush, second, Ms. Zeller-Granger. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, look, this is unanimous. Brandon, typically when you have a agenda item, we generally don't list you on the committee for reports, but since you actually have the floor, why don't you give your update now while you start at the floor?
Okay, sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Singletary. I greatly appreciate it. I want to just note that because in our last meeting, we had what I view as some very important presenters, that it's something that folks may want to check out on the YouTube archive and really understand. So we had Laura Atlas from the Test and Trace Corp of New York City Health and Hospitals, and Kelly Minus from NYU Langone Brooklyn Vaccine Center. And they gave us a very elaborate presentation with a number of slides that broke down where we stand in the city with respect to COVID-19 as of early February, where we stand with vaccine distribution, how we are progressing with the concerns about access for communities of color. And we really, I think, had a very elaborate discussion with them that I think people might benefit from if they look that up and saw what was being presented. They gave us several resources, one of which I posted at the board meeting, and I'll try to post it here at this meeting too, where people can get up-to-date vaccine statistics. And going forward, we're going to keep on the drumbeat with the COVID-19 vaccine distribution. I have some ideas that we'll be discussing at the next committee meeting. And it's going to be the practice of our committee going forward to always kind of provide an update as long as we're in this process about where we are in the process. So encourage anybody to come out who's particularly interested in staying up to date on this issue, and look forward to doing more on it. Other than that, we had a slew of liquor licenses which we approved unanimously, and they were all approved at the general board meeting. There were no issues of community concern with that. And I also want to note that we've had some discussions about potentially partnering with the Youth Education and Cultural Affairs Committee, because one of our prior presentations, a doctor from NYU Langone who had been specializing in childhood asthma had a very good idea brought to his attention about potentially collaborating with District 13 and District 15 to more thoroughly address the needs. Childhood asthma has for years been one of the most significant health concerns that were identified. It was one of the top concerns identified in our community district profile in 2018 from New York City Department of Health. So it was a pretty long, robust meeting with all of these things that we discussed, and that was the substance of it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I just want to highlight something that Mr. Smith mentioned, and I guess it's something that speaks to information that has been coming in. So the board office and even direct contact emails to me have received requests from various healthcare facilities, not all hospitals. Some of them have been representation from City Hall, that have wanted to give information about the vaccine, the pandemic, and things that are alike. So what we've decided to do to keep things flowing within the office is that we've asked Mr. Smith, and he's agreed to do so, to be the committee that's receiving that information. And it allows us to make sure that anything related to health goes to that committee. The benefit of having the YouTube room is it allows us to have those meetings recorded. It allows for information to be shared either in written form or now in the virtual video form. And so we've decided to have that information come through. Additionally, to keep from having such an overwhelm of information, we've asked that each month a different healthcare provider, a different source of information for health as it relates specifically to the pandemic and the vaccine be presented to the committee, and so that every month that level of information can be rotated through instead of a deluge of information. So just wanted to highlight that point, and once again thank Mr. Smith and his committee, and Jessica in the multiple fashions and multiple roles she plays supporting Mr. Smith so that that information can get out to the community. So thank you again for that. The next item on the agenda would be land use, and we have the one and only Mr. Carlton Gordon.
Thank you very much, Lenny.
Sure.
Okay. Yes, as Carlton Gordon for Landmarks Land Use. I see Irene, my co-chair, is online. Thank you very much, Irene. Now, who's not online, but who's done a great job is Karen Johnson, who's not even a board member, but is our very faithful and hardworking secretary. And I just think we'd like to give on the record, a shout out to her. We had 2 Landmark Preservation Commission applications. The first one is 256 Cumberland Street in the Fort Greene Historic District. The application is to renovate a single family dwelling unit within a multifamily building. And it's yes, the exterior scope of the work involves the existing windows of the rear and the rear facade. The scope of work involves minor relocation of interior partitions, refitting the kitchen and installation of new finishes and kitchen and living area. This was an interesting one. Well, a lot of the work involved in a rear side of the building. There were changes that have to be made that the Landmark Preservation Commission said that we should take a look at. And we liked what we saw. It basically was a slight a change at the top floor, because it's an interesting situation, even though it's a multifamily, it's a condominium, which was not initially specified. So it's basically the work at the top floor to still be seen by people. And the work was reasonable. It was to expand the to a larger window, which lets more light in at the top floor. We liked it, and we approved this one unanimously, 11-0-0. Okay, I see the contents coming up. And I just want to go past the content, but you could see what the building was like. This is a smallish, and you can see that they want to expand that area in the back to make it a little bit better, and a little bit larger. And we like the work and the proposal. If there's nothing else, then I can move on to the second item. The second item was a bit of a, we had some bit of different on this one. This is 11 Clifton Place in the Clinton Hill Historic District. Now, I'm not going to get into the descriptions on this one. It's a huge description on it, the first thing. But more important, the decisions on this one was unanimously against it. Now, it was not so much about criticism of the proposed work. The problem it turned out was that we heard from several of the committee members who live in Clinton Hill that the people who were doing it, the architects and the owners, did not communicate with the Clinton Hill groups to let them know that this work is going to be done. There was going to be some top floor work, very extensive work on this particular building. And the committee and the community was very upset at the extent of the work and that they were not notified in advance of that this work was coming along. The applicant said that they were going to do some work on, they did, work, and they would communicate with the neighbors, with the people on either side of, let's say, either side of the building. The problem was that most people in the community did not like it. Did not like what they thought was going to be a problem in their community, and we felt that we want to have the community, it was notified, people in the community, people in the area notified that certain things are going to be coming down. So this one, we unanimously rejected it at 11:00 because people in the area were not notified. We normally will work with a number of community groups. I know we worked for many years with the Brooklyn Heights Association. We worked with Dunbar Neighborhood Association, and we always get their opinion as part of the assessment process. This did not happen in this instance for Clinton Hill, and we said that it was very important that they should communicate, and that was our decision on this one. So we accepted the first one, we rejected the second one.
Thank you, Carlton. For purpose of a vote, I want to take each of these separately. So if there is any discussion, they don't get confused within the minutes. So let's start with the first item. First item is 256 Cumberland Street. I'll entertain a motion to accept the committee's recommendation.
Move.
Ms. Freibush, second. Ms. Allegringer. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great. So moved. The next item would be 11 Clifton Place. I'll entertain the committee's recommendation to reject the application based on the information that was shared by Mr. Gordon. Mr. Flournoy, can I get a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Gordon, is there any discussion on the motion? Ms. Gels?
Yeah, Carlton just said they wanted to do extensive redesigns, and the neighbors didn't like it. But what was the plan? Did he have a drawing of the plan? What is it they wanted to do that the neighbors didn't like?
The biggest thing was the top floor. In fact, I know one of the our members, I think Esther, in fact I see Esther online, she was very upset when they saw the usually they do what's I'm losing my word right now, but usually you do sort of a mock-up, and they felt that when they saw the mock-up, and if I maybe Esther, if you're correct, then when you saw the mock-up, that you felt that, wait a minute, what's going on? That this is a much larger, and it was intruding into the, it was much more than you would have expected, and just maybe fixing up an empty building. But this was a big concern from people in Clinton Hill. So they felt that it was because of the extensive work that's being done, especially going up and above, that they felt, and they wanted, it was more about communication. They wanted to know that this work was, well, at least they had a chance to, at least, if not have some input, at least to see and hear what's going on first. And they did not get that opportunity. So that's what happened, as well as disliking the, elements of the plan itself.
Can I say something, Mr. Secretary?
Yes.
Esther Blunt. The issue was people from that block was calling me and Mr. Augustus because they didn't even know what the plan was. They did see a mock-up on that building, but they had no communication at all on what was going to be built. And they was very upset. Now well, I'm not going to say what we found out now. We're going to go with what we knew at the land use meeting.
Right.
And so they was not contacted. And in the proposal, it involved the neighbor's chimney. Their work directly affected 11. Wait a minute, is 11? Is 9? Which one is? Anyway, it was going to affect the next door building chimney. They actually had to raise the chimney, and they didn't contact that neighbor. So that's why we disapproved it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Blunt. Now I understand a little bit more. Thanks.
Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor of the committee's recommendation to reject the application? Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? So moved. Thank you,
sir.
Carlton, and thank you, Ms. Blunt, for that additional information. Very helpful. Now we're into item number 7, committees to report. First up is Economic Development and Employment Committee. I remind the respective chairpersons to introduce yourself as you're speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, my name is Bill Flittoy. I'm the chair of the Economic Development and Employment Committee. We had our meeting on the 2nd, and I gave a full report to the full board. We had 2 presenters there, the Brooklyn Chambers of Commerce and the Brooklyn Women's Business Center. You can watch the entire committee meeting on YouTube. And for the board members and the exec meeting, you can see that in the board drive as far as any information about that. The reason why I suggest that people actually look at it on YouTube is there are quite a few services, loans, and grants available to small businesses throughout the area that people can actually apply to. And I think that'd be a very good thing for individuals in the small business area to do. Mr. Chair, I also have a question for you in regards to next month's meeting. This is pertaining to Corey Johnson's Planning Together legislation. We are wondering what's the board's position on that?
So are we talking about, I guess, the same thing, because I'm not sure if it all goes under different names. You may be referring to it as Planning Together, and is that the same as Intro 2186?
Yes, sir.
Okay, right. So I mentioned that at the beginning of my comments, but I'm happy to mention it again. That wasn't really brought to my attention, and I'll dare say the board's office attention in great detail until sometime late this afternoon, given that there's a public hearing tomorrow. I did go out and do some research, and it is just a preliminary hearing. Once again, for the purpose of everyone who may not have heard my comments at the very beginning, this is a proposal. It's the intro. The actual title is Intro 2186-2020. And the primary sponsor of the intro is Speaker Corey Johnson. It has received additional support from other council members, including Councilmember Steve Levin. The public hearing is tomorrow, or the first hearing is tomorrow. It's going to require a lot of steps and a lot of support to get this done. And so while I'm not in the position to have it on tonight's agenda because we found out about it rather late, I don't think it's going to preclude us from having an opportunity to review it, dig deeper, and then take a position on it, and even if it gets to the point of a recommendation. I also suspect that between the remainder committees that meet this month and those that will meet in March, there'll be enough time to take a robust deep dive about what this actual plan is. I think there's some components about it that are still not clear and still remains to be fleshed out. And so once we get more detail, we'll be able to take a better position on it. But right now, we don't have anything to go over tonight because of the short notice.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, would it be all right for my committee to take a look at it during our next meeting?
I think all committees will be excited to take a look at it. So if you want to put that on your item, be more than happy to, but I got a feeling a lot of committees are going to take a look at it.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, that's the end of my.
No, that's fine, Bill. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's the end of my report tonight.
Okay. What I do want to mention one other thing to kind of piggyback on this item is that there's a public hearing, a remote virtual hearing is what I'll say, taking place tomorrow. And so if anyone goes to the City Council website and at 10 a.m., in remote hearing room, virtual room 3, right? So the remote hearing, virtual room 3, you can watch and hear the discussion that's related to intro 2186. And so once again, that is tomorrow at 10 a.m. For those who have the time and the ability to do so, I encourage you to go take a look and actually hear what's discussed, and so that we stick to the facts and remove any hearsay or maybe misrepresentation or interpretation. So I encourage everyone to do so if time and schedule permits. The next committee to report is Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Barbara Zoller-Gringer, the second vice chair of the community board and the co-chair, along with Andrew Lazowski, of the Parks and Recreation Committee. We had a very robust agenda last time, and for the rest of the rest of this year through June, we will continue to have a robust agenda. Parks are really up there right now. To begin with, we had a follow-up from Rebecca Faulkner, who is the executive director of Playground NYC, to tell us that she does these pop-up playgrounds to encourage development of children. She's working on 2 sessions to be held at Commodore Barry Park on April 10th and April 17th. You can start collecting recyclables now, cardboard boxes that they might use, and we're going to hear more about it. It's very exciting that she's chosen this area. In particular, she wants to work with the NYCHA children, and it's a wonderful opportunity to shine a light on Commodore Barry. Then we had a presentation about the community garden updates, and I wanted to give a big shout out to Taya, who really put this all together and introduced it and did a great job of it. We had representatives from a number of community gardens. The community gardens have a variety of purposes. Some of them they were started for some of them different reasons. A lot of them had to do with urban blight. At least one was started as some therapy for patients with mental illness. So it was quite an exciting presentation, and I'm sure as a result of it, there'll be some people asking to become members of those groups. They vary some do flowers, some do vegetables, some it's mostly just sitting. And some of them are public school collaborations because they're attached to a public school. And so we have a wealth of knowledge now on CB2's website for that. Then segueing into the New York City Parks Department Green Thumb Initiative, which is the group that works very closely with the gardens, especially in particular the ones that are located on park property, and they lend all kinds of support to these gardens. And they're having a week-long virtual conference with workshops on growing vegetables, climate resilience, community organizing, racial justice. So if you go to the Green Thumb website, you may find, if you have time to watch any of that, you'll find out more about that. Then we had a presentation, again from the New York City Parks Department, on the kiosk design at Brooklyn Borough Hall. As you know, there was it's still standing, this small food stand, and there is the people who own the lease for that stand have apparently transferred that lease to another company, which is called GDK, German Doner Kebab, and apparently they have a few locations in other places in New York City and around the world, a number of them, and they're responsible for building a building there. It's going to be twice the size of the Empanada building. There were quite a few concerns raised about it, and concerns about with this, the process for choosing this this entity, whether it's going to disrupt traffic on the street in front of it. And we garnered a bit of press as a result of the concerns about this. So it was a very busy meeting, and we'll be meeting again next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Next committee to report, Transportation and Public Safety.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Gelbs. I'm the Vice Chair of Transportation and Public Safety. We had our meeting last week. It was a very long meeting. It ended after 8:30 because we had 3 presenters. We had Ronald Snyder, who was an Assistant District Attorney for Kings County, and he's the Chief of Staff of the Street Safety Bureau. And this was a bureau that was formed in response to the mayor's Vision Zero. So he indicated that his mandate was to deal with traffic violence concerning cyclists. He stated that his bureau worked with the NYPD in handling cases that involved death and a likelihood of death, or whether a victim was a critical condition. He said that his group is actually 24/7, and they are on the scene whenever whenever an accident involving a cyclist. They try to be on the scene, and they delve into the accident to make sure that the cyclist is represented in the way that he or she should be, and working also with the NYPD. So there was quite a lively discussion about that. Oh, sorry about that. That's my dog. There was quite a lively discussion about that because everybody isn't, most of us are cyclists now. And that was about an hour, if Mr. Duke, an hour worth of talking about, what is he doing and what's going on with the cyclists. But from that, we had a presentation by Mr. Kyle. Oh, sorry about that. Kyle Gorman, he's a senior program manager in DOT Public Spaces, and he gave us a very nice presentation about open streets. So we talked about the open streets that were for recreational purposes, the open streets that were for restaurants and protected bike lanes. He also brought a couple of people from the neighborhoods, from Dumbo, from downtown Brooklyn, Fort Greene, and Clinton Hills. And these were all the community partners, and they all had very nice things to say about having open streets. The plan is to actually make it a permanent fixture in New York, which everybody was happy about that. From that, we went on to Emily. I'm gonna kill her name. Rekulme. She is the representative from DOT, and we had given her DOT for the last 2 years about 20 to 40 questions that we needed answers for. They came back. We had to pare down to about 10 or 20. She answered most of the questions, but in a way that it felt like she didn't want to be there to answer the questions, and Juliet had to really ask question upon question to get the answers we were looking for. But that is that. It seems to me that she was there, didn't want to be there, give answers that almost like you thought you were in kindergarten, begging her to give you. We were adults. We want the straight facts, but she was just, oh, please, I don't want to say the word. Excuse me, half-assed answers. I hate to say that, but I think that DOT needs to show a little bit more respect to us. And when we ask questions, they should give us in-depth answers and come prepared. And actually, even if she has to pretend that she is happy to be there, at least pretend. It was, to me, I thought she was not a good representative of that. And maybe her boss needs to come and answer those questions. That's how I felt.
Is it me or I can't hear Cheryl either?
No, that was me.
I
I
can't
touched
hear
it.
either.
Okay, okay.
That was me. But, you know, it is hard, Lenny, Mr. Chair, and John do will agree with me. It's hard to sit there and you have discussions and everybody, and you have the community bringing questions and the committee members bringing questions, and you give it to that, and then the response is, you know, well, whatever. We'll give you whatever, and you have to accept it. And now you're talking about transportation, which is to me, everybody wants the answers. We want the truth. Don't say, oh, that was done in 2019. So somebody would say, well, what was the result of that study? Oh, I don't know. You can look it up. That's the way she behaved.
You know, listen, I get it. This has been a sore point of the committee for such a long time. And just so that we're all on the same page, I'm not sure that, you know, sometimes acronyms don't always translate to everyone. So DOT, for those who are not aware, is the Department of Transportation. We just put that out there. And it has been a challenge for some time, particularly for the Transportation Committee, which is the natural committee that you would think would get the robust responses in the partnership with that larger city agency. But Carol Ann and I are working on a meeting with them. And we've received feedback from the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner. The meeting should be scheduled, you know, any day now. And then once we have an opportunity to schedule that meeting, trust me, it will be something that will be reiterated to the Borough Commissioner, because this is not the first time that we've shared these comments. It's not the first time we received the feedback from the committee. We'll just continue to push to get a solution that works for both the office and the committee. So thank you for the feedback and the colorful description.
I'm not, you have to forgive me. I tried so hard not to say that.
No, it's all right. It's all right. I just figured that it was a good opportunity to tease you first. I figured I would, but no complaints. I think we all understand the translation and the frustration that goes with it. And my hats off to you and the committee for the work that you do. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So next item on the agenda is item number 8, other committee business. So I don't have any.
I think we have my committee.
Oh, Betty, I'm sorry. Yes, we do. Youth Education and Cultural Affairs.
Thank you. So I'm Betty Freibush. I'm the chair of Youth Education and Cultural Affairs. I did report out at the full meeting of our last meeting, but I want to bring everyone's attention to our next meeting and future meetings in the spirit of collaboration between committees that our chair, Mr. Singletary, has always talked about, that the work happens in committees and a lot of it overlaps between different committees, and he's always expressed a desire for collaboration since many of these issues interest many of us. So there in New York City has a task force on disconnected youth. And what is that? Those are students that are out of school and out of work. Now, before the COVID times, this city task force started, and we're concerned not just, okay, kids aren't in school, they aren't at work, but it has the long-term effects for the individuals as well as their families and communities, because they're likely to basically stay in poverty, not contribute to the community in different ways. So this was a problem before that, and things were going a little better. The high school completion rate was a little better, and there were more like low wage entry jobs for young people. So people had some employment. But now with the COVID times, we've seen massive disruptions to K-12. We've seen kids who normally would go to college not going to college, and the massive job losses in the sectors that employ high numbers of young adults. So in 2018, there were more than 1 in 8 New Yorkers in that age group who are out of school and out of work. And now we anticipate it's much higher. So I've spoken to Mr. Flanoy, and I think some of the other chairs will be interested in this as well. This Wednesday, we're hearing from one of them. We were very lucky, thanks to Taya's excellent, I guess, persuasiveness in getting this person, but someone from the DOE, the Department of Ed, who sits on this task force. But it isn't just the Department of Ed or the workforce people. There's nonprofits on this committee. There's people that deal in social service, people that deal in the mayor's office of what is it, the criminal justice system, the HRA, homelessness, many of these aspects of our city life, that there are key members like of the Fortune Society. I mean, this isn't a low-level committee. I think this is a pretty, I mean, the people who are represented are pretty high level. So they're looking, because basically there's a patchwork of programs, there's no uniform strategy, and there's no real plan. It's like Department of Ed does something, Department of Justice, like that. So they want to emphasize, what are the best practices that have emerged, and what kind of policies can we all advocate for citywide to centralize and specify specific responsibility for out-of-school, out-of-work policy, et cetera, et cetera. So please come to our committee. Please find out more about this on the report, and maybe some of your other committees. Maybe Hess would be interested as well, and I'm sure there are overlaps, for other committees as well. But I know that Mr. Flanoy is very interested. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Betty. My apologies for not recognizing you on my list. I think I crossed out your list your name by accident. So thank you.
No worries.
So I guess now we're up to item number 8, which is other committee business. I don't have anything in particular, and I'll defer to Carol Ann, who, by the way, is doing an excellent job leading the office and making sure that we don't have any degradation in service and we have continuity, to see if anything was communicated to her that may not have been communicated to me.
Hello, good night, everyone. No, we're up to date right now, Lenny. Thank you.
Okay. All right, great. Perfect. So moving to the next item would be community forum. And as a reminder, this is where non-executive committee members, independent of whether you are a board member of community board, or if you're a non-board member, or if you're just someone from the community, or you're part of a stakeholder group, have an opportunity to raise a concern or have a discussion. We ask that you keep your comments to 2 minutes. And at this time, I'll open it up to see if the non-executive committee members who are joining us tonight will have any comments, questions, or concerns they want to share with the executive committee.
Yes, John Dew has issues to discuss. Okay, I have a couple of items. First of all, I need to go backwards a little bit. We talked at land use about items related to the upzoning that occurred in 2004 and how none of the community benefits that were negotiated been done. For example, ADA access to all of the train stations downtown Brooklyn. York Street is a particular issue now because Brooklyn Bridge Park and all of the development that has occurred in Dumbo, York Street is one of the 2 stations. It is actually dangerous. That station has to close down sometimes because it cannot accommodate the crowds. This is a documented issue. It has been a community concern for decades now. Nothing has been done. We are waiting for a real bad accident to happen at that station. That was discussed at the committee, but because Mr. Gordon doesn't have on the agenda a committee discussion, you're not hearing this. But this was a major part of the discussion. So I'm asking that you consider having the committees that have a vote item also be able to talk about the issues related to the committee that were not on the agenda. You're missing out on a lot. 130 St. Felix, I think I mentioned, there's a lawsuit generated by the community because the community actually was not heard when the executive committee heard that particular item. The presentation, just so the executive committee knows, was not a landmarks presentation, even though that was a landmarks application. It was a ULURP application. That's what you actually voted on. You didn't get landmarks kinds of questions. You didn't get landmarks kinds of impacts. So you approved it, but you actually approved a ULURP. In that particular meeting, you did not hear from the community at all. And the community is absolutely against a 24-story or 23-story now building being built next to the Williamsburg Savings Bank, an icon in the world. So I just to put that out there, that the community was not counseled for that particular item. And I'm going to be very frank, as all of you know that I like to be, that the community board was again set up to not do the right thing for that portion of the community. You talk about racism and that kind of stuff. You should also be aware that the sense of how the community board addresses the eastern portion of the community is very different than what you get from Brooklyn Heights, because it isn't the same level of concern, as was indicated by the comments from Esther Blount, where the committee did not hear from the actual local organization. The communities of Clinton Hill and Fort Greene are very active. There are folk that we should be in constant contact with for all of these initiatives. I have so much more, but I'll stop there because I'm past my 2 minutes already.
Anyone else with comments for this open session, a community forum? Great. Next item on the agenda is adjournment. Thank you, everyone. Get home safe, and I appreciate you participating this evening. Take care.
Have a good night, everyone.
Hey, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, all. Be safe.